years.
Between our fellow Europeans on the Balkans and you to attend the EU-Balkan Summit. And I would also like to thank EU40, the Coca-Cola company, for supporting this summit. The intention of this summit is to fill the gap which still exists in Europe, as long as we also face questions concerning the judicial cooperation and democratic progress in the region. In its annual progress report to open accession negotiations, one of my favorite languages.
My club moderation.
After all what we've passed through, our main.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank the organizers for very kind invitation to take part in Jubilee Friends of Europe conference, and which is very timely, as it has been said in the opening remarks. We are waiting for certain developments in the region and in Brussels, which we hold as very, very important for the future of the Western Balkans and for the future European perspective of the Western Balkans. So let me share with you basically three talking points, briefly in 5 minutes or so we have at our disposal. First of all is that I believe that the more integrated countries of the Western Balkans, the more democracy, the more democratic Western Balkans. Secondly, I believe that with or without the crisis, fiscal adjustments, structural reforms and cutting red tape has been necessary in order to gain competitiveness, because I believe in the huge potential of the Western Balkans for economic growth, of course. And thirdly, it is the Euro crisis and the impact of the Euro crisis on the Western Balkan countries and our economies, as we've been already quite intertwined with what is going on in Europe. So first of all, on the first talking point, Montenegrin experience shows that pursuing political criteria that have been set by the European Commission helped boost the process of dialogue in Montenegro, helped boost the inclusiveness of the process in attempt to build broad consensus over the integration. And therefore, sticking to the priorities of meeting the European agenda, meeting the NATO agenda, and we are only weeks away from our full-fledged membership into WTO, and free trade agreements means that countries such Montenegro could, by meeting the agenda tasks, improve the way our institutions perform. And I think the biggest achievement we've managed to show in past a year has been that credible efforts that we've been investing into responding to the European Commission's benchmarks suggest that we are able to show commitment, we are able to invest efforts to build institutions that will be European-like in order to set ground for future stability, security, and prosperity of Montenegro. I'm quite sure that we share all the countries in the region share basically all the goals, and the approach can be applied to other countries in Western Balkans. Secondly, with or without the crisis, I think we've had to introduce fiscal adjustment, we've had to introduce structural reforms, and we've had to cut the red tape. Again, by sharing with you Montenegrin experience, next year our budget deficit will drop to 1.2% and public debt will remain at 45% or so. Montenegro will be among a handful of countries that would actually be complying with Maastricht criteria. I think that that's extremely important for the stability, both fiscal and financial stability in Montenegro, given the overall crisis that is looming and given the prognosis, which is quite bleak, that next year we may have another recession in Europe. Structural agenda is something that countries in the region have to do because of demography, because of the need to offer more chances to the youth. We need to boost youth employment. We need to unleash productivity, which has been locked in the red tape, which has been locked in structurally rigid systems, and therefore. What we've done in past year, we've implemented the reforms of the pension system, introducing 67 as retirement age for both men and women, which will gradually come to pass. But of course, that's not only responding to that is not only our response to the current crisis. It is actually a response to the long-term demographic challenges we've had. And very recently, we have passed the amendments to the labor law, which is trying to strike a more proper balance between flexibility and security. More in favor of flexibility than we've had in the past, because we need to help entrepreneurs, we need to help small and medium-sized companies, and we need to offer possibilities, again, for more dynamics in the system and more youth employment. And then cutting red tape, which I think is important twofold. First of all, it's important because we are helping entrepreneurs by removing barriers, by removing excessive procedures, transaction costs, and so on and so on. And we have looked at doing business, World Bank's report, and prepared the action plan to act. And I'm quite sure that next year's doing business report will mirror significant improvement in the overall situation as we're going to implement the set of pieces of legislation we've passed. But that's important also from there's another important aspect of the cutting of the red tape. It is that by doing so, we are narrowing the possibilities to corrupt administration, to corrupt public officials, because the less barriers, the less offices you have to go to, there is less possibilities, there is more possibilities to implement anti-corruptive policies. Thirdly, as time is quickly running by, thirdly is the impact of the Euro crisis of the Western Balkan countries. We're quite concerned in Montenegro about what's going on in the Eurozone. The prognosis of the IMF, which I've heard recently, suggesting that the next recession is coming up next year, is definitely raising concerns, as it shows that probably more austerity than some people would like to see proves to be necessary, because by having 1.2 budget deficit or keeping public debt at about 44–45% gives you some small space to react if there is bigger shock spilling over to Western Balkan countries, while at the same time still being within the Maastricht criteria. But the problem is that we are concerned because every now and again there is another debate and there is prolonged uncertainty. I think finally this is going to be a final attempt next week to pass certain decisions and remove the deficit of decisiveness. That's absolutely necessary, because we're quite concerned as an open, vulnerable economy, and we're quite concerned that at some point it is not the question of fundamentals and solvency, it is the question of the access to the capital markets, which can be frozen, and a system may be at risk. I'm not referring only to Montenegro, which is already circulating euros as part of the unofficial part of the Eurozone. I'm also referring to other countries in the region whose economies are very much integrated to the Eurozone and informally Euroized. First of all, I don't think that there will be any breakup of the Eurozone. I think that the cost of the alternative are way too high to be affordable. Therefore, I don't believe in the breakup of the Eurozone. What I believe is the need to act quickly, introduce a mechanism that would soothe the pain of the market, that would bring in more certainty, and probably at some point I can envisage more economic governance, which may transform into more coherent fiscal policies, At this point, I would rather argue for more harmonization in the VAT, excise policies, leaving income taxes to remain part of the productivity and competitiveness of the national economies. But with regards to the economic policy that we've been implementing in past a decade or so, the logic of connecting to euro has been that euro has been the anchor of the economic reforms in Montenegro. Because it simply pushes you to deal with the grey economy, to introduce competitive tax policy, to restructure the economy, to privatize, to implement the policies which are related to cutting red tape and so on, making labor market more flexible and so on and so on. Therefore, that's the logic I would remain applying in Montenegro. I think sticking to the hard currency is something that Montenegro economy needs, and I very much hope that there will be more and more countries to join Eurozone later on.
So no secret planning committees for worst case scenarios?
No secret planning committees.
All right, well you wouldn't tell me anyway, but it was worth asking, I suppose. But